Finally, tonight, the White House is tackling a very serious problem, the decline of honeybees. The population declined by 23% last winter. The White House is now setting up a task force to reverse the trend. The EPA and Agriculture Department will lead the effort, which includes developing new honeybee habitats. Chris Harp is an organic beekeeper, and he teaches beekeeping and is the co-founder of Honeybee Lives. Honeybee Lives, and he's joining us here in our New York studio. Welcome to Arise America. Thanks for coming in. You drove down just to be with us to talk about this, and I really appreciate it. You know, I think we all learned at some point in elementary school about the importance of the bee, but most of us have forgotten that. Let's just start with a little bit of a primer of why bees are so important to our ecosystem.
Bees are very important to our ecosystem, Debbie. What they do is they are single source pollinators, which almost none of your other pollinators are. And when I say single source, what I mean is that they go to a specific flower and only that flower. You won't see a honeybee going from a sunflower to a tulip to a rose. They will go to a rose to a rose to a rose, or to a sunflower, sunflower, sunflower on each foraging trip that they make out of their hive. So what makes them so beneficial for the farmers is that we have this, crop, all the tomatoes that need to be pollinated, all the almonds that need to be pollinated, all the peaches that need to be pollinated, and the honeybee will be going only to the peach trees, or only to the apple trees, or whatever. So they're very beneficial for using them for a farming purpose.
Yeah, so they're absolutely essential to a lot of what we eat, what we grow and what we eat.
A whole lot,
in this country. Let me just ask you this question in terms of the single source pollinator, the fact that they go from one thing to the same thing. Is that determined by species? Is that determined by, I don't even know how to ask the question, but how does a bee decide what it's going to pollinate?
It decides what it's going to pollinate based on the need of the hive. And when there are certain protein levels that need to be met to make the bread to feed the babies, etc., or there's certain nectars that need to be more than another nectar to appreciate the food intake that they need to stay strong, they determine which ones are the most important to go out and get. And it's accomplished also by, we've all heard of the waggle dance. And when a bee comes back to the hive that found a good source of something that they really need, she does this little dance and shakes her abdomen and does a circle or a figure 8. And the other bees observing that will go to within 1 meter, even up to 3 miles away of where she told them to go.
Is that right? Yeah. We haven't all heard of the waggle dance. I just learned something new. That's so interesting. So I've been reading this in the news for quite some time now. There's been a decline in bee populations almost globally in certain areas, certainly in South America, here in the U.S.
Yes.
Chris, talk to us a little bit about why we're seeing that.
Well, as I just said, the single source pollination. Now, when we have an agricultural system that we have set up here in other areas of the world that is monocrop, and that's when you have miles and miles and miles of this one particular fruit or vegetable that needs to be pollinated, then, as I mentioned earlier, that the bee determines on what it needs to go to based on the food requirements of the hive, but all they can go to is pumpkins. Then they're not bringing back the nutrients that they need to feed their larvae, their babies, to have the babies grow up big and strong and diverse. So that has an impact on the strength and health of the bee, because they don't have the choice of going to all these different things. They only have, for miles and miles and miles, just one source of food to be coming in the house. It's like you going out and bringing every single day for the next 2 months, all you bring back is bread, and that's it.
Yeah, my daughter would absolutely revolt. Well, that's so interesting, because we depend on these bees in our agriculture industry, but it is our agriculture processes, it sounds like to me, that is affecting the population. What about some of the other things? Because everybody wants to blame global warming.
Yes, no. That certainly has an effect. But the other things being, again, the pesticides having an effect, and they study each pesticide individually as to its effect on a bee. What they don't do, and what other scientists have done, and they've been doing in the EU and in Canada, they've been finding that that when you take this one pesticide and you have another pesticide or herbicide or a fungicide and you mix the two together, there's a synergistic effect that increases the toxicity hundreds to thousands of percentage points. So this one pesticide doesn't kill a bee. This one herbicide doesn't kill a bee. You put those two together and it and it has a devastating effect on them. And that's what they're not studying. They're not studying when you put these two together. They're only saying, our one thing is good. Our other one thing is good. Doesn't hurt them, doesn't hurt them. Put the two together, it's a different story.
And that brings me very naturally to my next question. Of course, the president has put together this task force, dedicated $8 million to addressing this. So what do you think this task force should be focusing on to stop this problem and to help alleviate it?
What the task force should work on is what I've just said. It should work on one of the things that it is initiating, which is a good thing that I saw in that, is to have, they're putting aside $8 million to have farmers be able to have more land for the pollinators to live off of. And that's excellent. What I've learned is a study that was done in which farmers specifically took 30% of their land and let it go fallow, i.e., so that wild plants could grow there.
I got to jump in. I am so sorry, Chris. We're all out of time because we're all out of show. But thank you so much for telling us about the waggle dance. I'm most excited about that. Take care.
Appreciate it.
And thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow on Rise America. Bye-bye.